I heard somebody talking sometime this weekend, and he was saying something that really captured my attention, not because I didn't know it, but because of the way he presented the concept. And that's what I'm all about, is like learning principles that get deeply embedded in our lives that move us forward and make us strong as men. He basically said successful people, educated or uneducated, rich or poor, it doesn't matter. What makes them successful is one common denominator, and that is consistency. Not talent, not opportunity, not the education, not even motivation. It was consistency. And I want to just briefly talk about why consistency is so important rather than motivation. Motivation is very overrated. It's like one of the highest performing niches on YouTube. And yet, to me, it's very overrated. I coach college rugby, and I see players every season. I get new players coming in. Most of them have never played rugby in their lives before. And I see how what makes the difference between those that are consistent and those that are not. Players that only show up when they're motivated don't know how to play as a team when it comes to tournaments. They may be enthusiastic in one or two practices, but they kind of fizzle out after a while. And it affects the whole team when you've got players that are not disciplined and consistent. In fact, one player asked me last season, "How do I get motivated, coach?" And I said, "Forget about being motivated." I said, "Get disciplined." A team is built not on one off motivations, but on consistent daily grind, not in big moments. A sign outside the English swimmers' cloakroom, I think it's the English, it says, Galas, Olympics are not won at the Olympics, they're won every day in the pool. And I love that. I quote that often. And I did my son too, and I'll tell you about him in a few minutes. So the tournament doesn't build the team. It's the Monday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, whatever, practices where nobody sees them performing, but yet that's what builds the team. Um, I recently had a bunch of guys, they came through a whole period with me, a whole well, actually a number of seasons, and they turned out to be very good. They were talented. We trained and I taught them well, and initially they were very enthusiastic, but they got to their last year and they could have performed really, really well, and they didn't. And at the end, at the last tournament, they kind of looked dejected, and I said, I'm sorry to say, but I have to tell you what I always tell you. I told you so. And what I told you is that without consistent effort in every single practice, there's no team. And when there's no team, you don't win games. And the same goes for me as a coach. I mean, I've had back surgeries, I've had cancer scares, and I still showed up every single practice because I know that I'm part of that team. If I'm not there, then they cannot perform as a team. And so I showed up and contributed. When it's difficult, when it's freezing cold, when the snow is out, I show up, not on the field, but we do it indoors then. But then people get lazy and they don't feel like going late to a later practice and doing it indoors, so they kind of leave it, and then it shows. If I only coached when I felt inspired, I wouldn't be the coach. I would just be a bench warmer spectator. I have to model it. I have to show up whether I feel like it or not. I'm always there, unless I'm desperately not able to be there. 2 back surgeries for me, 22 and 24. Recovery from those was really, really hard, especially after the last one, which wasn't as bad as the first one, but somehow that one affected me more. And so but I go to gym for recovery. Not, and then I wake up in the morning, not your usual feeling stiff. I mean, I'm talking about pain. I have aches and pains. I have to push through the scar tissue, the weak legs, the weak back, things that I have to master. I have to get through it. Otherwise, I said to my wife, the pain the pain I'm experiencing now is hard. It's very hard, but it's nothing compared to the consequences of not being disciplined and consistent in my training when I get old. At one point, I thought, you know what, I'm resigned to my recliner for the rest of my life. I'm really, it was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I thought that I will not be able to do this. I was sleeping in my recliner and sitting in my recliner. I just, it was so painful to do anything, any kind of exercise. But I just did what I could, and I stayed with it. I stayed with it. I made a decision: no injections, no steroid injections, no. I went for one ablation, and that was it. I said, never again. I'll never do that again. Uh, and I said, there's no shortcuts to this. I can dull the pain for a little bit, but it's going to come back. And what am I going to keep doing this for for the next 20, 30 years of my life? I don't think so. There was only one way for me, and that was train, get strong, and get my body back to working again. But why could I do that? Because when I was 30 odd years old, I started training and I stayed consistent. I built a foundation in those days from early, and I didn't see the value of it. Then you're doing it for aesthetics. Let me see how good I look in front of the mirror. Let's hope my wife notices my new muscles. But I didn't realize the value that it would have 30 years down the line. Consistency, you understand, compounds. You don't see it working straight away until the day that you really need it. When I went for my first surgery, I was doing like nearly 100 push-ups a day. And that got me through having to learn to walk again. I had the strength to get up out of the bed, take the walker early, and start working at it, stretching, getting the muscles activated again. Many don't. Many just lay there and accept this is the fate. I'm not prepared to, because I know the principle that consistency works and consistency compounds. Let me tell you about my son. My youngest son, Jesse, he started swimming when he was like about 14 years old. And I said to him the one thing about training: if you want to be successful, you've got to be consistent. And I pushed him a little bit, but he got it, and he was in that water twice a day, 6 in the morning and then 6 at night. twice a day for 5 years, plus galas, Sunday training sessions. I know he didn't feel like it always, but he stayed with it. He would just get in the water and push through. And I can be honest, I didn't always feel like taking him either. It was demanding. You sit around at the pool for 6 in the morning. We were in England at that point in time, and you don't feel like sitting in the car park at 6 o'clock in the morning. But we did, and I did. In 2018, we moved to England. Immigrated to America. We arrive here, and a few weeks later, Jesse's diagnosed with a cancerous tumor the size of a saucepan. The next couple of months is a big blur of chemo, surgeries, fighting for his life, and then recovery. We had a miracle. It was a blur. I wrote a book about it. I'll stick the link to it in the description. But because I wrote a book about it, it was such a life altering experience. But the months that followed, his physical foundation that we had built, him and I together, him in the water as an athlete, that consistency contributed to him getting through that whole experience. It didn't save his life, but I really believe that it was a major contribution. I'm very thankful that I kind of ignited and inspired him to start swimming, because he didn't know, I didn't know what lay ahead, and that was the fight for his life. And he got through that. So I'm not saying that swimming saved his life, but what I'm saying is consistency builds a foundation to give you the strength, the ability to handle things, that challenges that you might not know you are going to face. You never know what you're training for. You never know what you're being consistent for. Everyone wants instant motivation for instant results. I need motivation, and then I'll get going. These people say, well, I need to go to gym to get motivated. I say, you know what? You've got to get to the place where you are so focused, not focused, but it becomes part of your nature. You're so consistent, so disciplined in training, whether you go to gym or stay at home, in a hotel room, on holiday, it doesn't matter, that you will constantly and consistently give your body what it needs to move, to be strong, so that it can handle what it has to face. Motivation is an emotion,